professional development session is going to be really good for you. You're gonna learn about how to approach the job market in this weird time that we're in. And some of the people we have on the panel are longtime friends of the School of Communications. And so they'll be somebody that you can reach out to going forward. So I'm happy you're all here. Enjoy the session, and you'll next hear from Dr. Yannick Rice-Lamb.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
As Professor Sturgis says, we have a great panel and a great moderator here, and you're going to get a lot out of this program, and I hope you continue to network with them. They all know each other, and they know a lot of other people, and they can help you, refer you, advise you, all kinds of things like that. But at this time, I'd like to introduce a daughter of Howard, Jasper Smith. So some of you already know her from the Hilltop. She was editor-in-chief twice, and she had been on the staff before that. And she's a staff writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education. She went there through a fellowship, and immediately she started, making waves in what she was doing. I'm a judge for the Education Writers Association, and I wasn't in her category, but I was aware of the finalists, and I was really proud to see that she was a finalist among all these other professional journalists. And she continued to win other awards, and she's the Washington Association of Black Journalists Emerging Journalist of the Year. She's a very recent Howard graduate, so she's someone you could follow right in her footsteps. She also kind of spearheaded the 100th anniversary of the Hilltop, which you all know was co-founded by Zoriel Hurston, and she had Isabel Wilkinson here as the guest speaker, but it was a great event, and she did a fantastic job along with her staff in putting that together, among other things, the coverage and different things that were initiated at the Hilltop. So without further ado, I'll have her take over.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to introduce my panelists and get into a discussion about how to kickstart your career in journalism. So I'm going to introduce everyone, starting with Terrell Mazzell, who is the Washington Post senior newsroom recruiter. In his role, Terrell mainly focuses on the Post's early career recruiting, including their summer internship and external recruiting efforts. Additionally, he is involved with newsroom budget and operations functions. He is also the co-chair of Post in Color, the Post Employee Resource Group for Black employees. Terrell began his career at the Washington Post in 2022 after more than 3 years at Politico. While at Politico, he worked as a talent acquisition partner, recruiting talent for the news organization's editorial, product, and client services team. He later moved to the role of diversity and inclusion partner, a position he created, charged with leading diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts across Politico. And then we have Robin Turner, who is a career journalist with a strong background in daily news, having worked at local, national, and international organizations. Over her career, she has worked as a copy editor, assignment editor, publication managing editor, and director of newsroom initiatives focused on talent development, training, and newsroom culture. As a DEI practitioner, Robin has led efforts to increase diversity on editorial staffs and in news coverage, infusing voices from various perspectives and identifying diverse angles for top stories of the day. As a media executive at Dow Jones, Robin helped develop strategy, advise executives, and launch initiatives for Dow Jones that engaged more than 1,800 college faculty members nationally. She also designed the HBC Media Collective, a summer training program at its inaugural cohort for London to explore news coverage at Dow Jones' sister publications and radio stations. Robin enjoys engaging with emerging journalists in the classroom setting, and has helped many sharpen their skills and land opportunities in various newsrooms. Some organizations where Robin has worked included Ottawa Community Newspapers, radio stations in Northeast Ohio, Dow Jones, The Wall Street Journal, NBC, USA Today, Elsevier, and Politico. As an ordained Baptist minister, Robin once won a prize by the Associated Press for national religious coverage in Minnesota. She partnered with the Gallup Poll, this database project, to understand religious trends. In 2022, Robin was a recipient of NABJ's Ida B. Wells Award for contributions to newsroom diversity, and for the NABJ Political Task Force Inaugural Chairperson's Award for contributions to talent development. And we have Boyd Daytona, She's the national recruiter at Axios, where she works closely with editorial leadership to hire journalists and editors for a wide range of newsroom and digital roles across the country. She's passionate about creating a thoughtful, transparent hiring process and helping candidates navigate the journalism job market. Hoy also leads Axios' recruiting efforts at national conferences and university career events, connecting early to senior career journalists with opportunities in today's newsroom. Through her work, she helps shape how Axios attracts and supports the next generation of journalistic talent. Tim Lampley is an award-winning broadcaster whose work was recently featured briefly in the CNN HBO documentary Luther Never Too Much, produced by actor Jamie Foxx and Sony Music Entertainment. With a career that has spanned multiple television stations, including WMBD-TV in Peoria, Illinois, WTVO-TV in Rockford, Illinois, KSDK-TV in St. Louis, Missouri, and BET Networks in Washington, D.C., Tim has produced hundreds of stories and interviewed countless figures in news, entertainment, and sports. Notably, Lampley was the sole on-the-ground news reporter for Revolt TV and the Urban One Network during the Ferguson, Missouri uprising in 2014. A four-time Emmy nominee and two-time WHJ Salute to Excellence winner, Tim's passion for journalism began in high school, and today he continues to inspire and lead through impactful work as a national recruitment manager for Report for America. And last, we have Bill Lewis, who's a journalist from Detroit, Michigan. He is the deputy editor at HuffPost and president of the Washington Association of Black Journalists. Prior to his role at HuffPost, he was a staff writer and programming editor at the millennial-based digital news outlet Mike in New York City. He was recently named to the 2025 Ebony Magazine Power 100 list. He was a 2017 participant in the prestigious Paul Miller Washington Reporting Fellowship Program. He's also the author of the award-winning newsletter What I'm Reading. So we have a great line of panelists here. All right, so let's jump right in. You guys have such impressive resumes, career accomplishments. And I think one thing that's really important for our young journalists to understand is that every path in journalism starts differently. Every career path starts differently. I'd love to just kind of hear about the job that you feel like jump-started your career. What was the roles you can do, and what made it so impactful on your career journey?
Okay, I can start something then. I moved to DC in 2015. I took an internship at HuffPost, then the Huffington Post, changed our name. I was an intern, and before that, I was rejected by a bunch of different internships. I was rejected by BuzzFeed internship, which is funny because now BuzzFeed owns HuffPost. I was rejected by all these sorts of different small internships that I was applying for, mostly because I didn't go to journalism school. I've never taken a journalism class in my life. So I had no clips, had nothing like that, really. So when I applied for HuffPost, the thing that stood out to them was that my background was radically different from everyone else that was applying for roles. And so I was just like pretty honest with the person who hired me, Amanda Turkle. And I always say this, Amanda is she's like this tall Asian lady. She is the hardest editor I've ever had because she just used to just rip into my stories. I used to be like that, but I'm gonna leave DC just a bit, it's over. Every time she would edit something, but she was great. But anyway, during our interview, she was the person who hired me. She had basically said we took an interest to your resume because it was so different, but also because you were storytelling in a different sort of unique way on social media at the time. This was 2014. So people were using social media in a way different way than they are kind of now, I think. And so that caught their attention. And so once I was able to kind of get that interview, I was able to explain okay, here's what I'd be able to bring to your newsroom because I don't think you all are, I didn't say it like this, I don't think that you all are doing social media in the best manner, or not the best manner, but just you all aren't utilizing it to the best of your ability, like I am. So that was a way for me to kind of find an entry point in there. And then once I decided okay, I love this field and this career, I'm going to do anything that I can to do better and get better. I started experimenting in different opportunities. I was reporting on the Hill. I was finding stories on social media. I was doing interviews. I was doing all sorts of things to, I guess, prove my value to that newsroom. And so that position really jump-started my career.
I'll jump in there about internships, and it's very important to anybody's career. I would say my internship at KSDK, the NBC affiliate that I later worked for, was very impactful, sort of jump-starting my career. Our job as interns were to answer phones, do research work, kind of just be there as an assistant for the reporters. And I recall that we could wear whatever we wanted to. Nobody gave us any kind of code or anything about anything. But I was strategic in looking at the people who were professional. And I thought, I'm not really gonna pattern my style, and I'm not gonna dress for the job that I have. I'm gonna dress for the job that I want, right? And so I came in, unlike everybody else, in a suit and tie every day, because that's what the reporters were wearing at the time. Asked all the reporters if I could go out on stories with them when I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do for my internship. And I just wanted to stand out in that way. And to say later on, they hired me to come back and work. They didn't do that with any of their intern from the time that I was intern. So, yeah.
I think for me, a little bit similar to kind of like Phil's background. I went to Old Dominion University that up until last year did not have a journalism program. We had a communications major, and I majored in comms, and was part of our student paper and our campus radio station, but I wasn't a journalism major. Didn't pursue it professionally when I first left college. Won't bore you with this part, but I kind of fell into like recruiting and HR, just from my experience in college. And that was really what I was doing from a professional standpoint, but I always had a love and passion for journalism. I was obsessed with it in a way that my peers weren't, as far as paying for news and really just being obsessed with it in different mediums and different forms. And I was working HR recruiting for a small mom and pop place in Richmond, and just got, like I still am, was just on LinkedIn constantly, and Politico was hiring for a recruiter in their HR team. And I wasn't really looking for a job, but I was like, man, that's kind of exactly what I would like to do if I had the opportunity to just get back into, or really get back into what I loved from a day-to-day perspective when I was in college, but what I had not done professionally, which was like work in a news organization. So I applied and said I'll go until they stopped talking to me, and I ultimately got the job. Kind of like Jasper mentioned earlier, I started out supporting like tech and product roles, but a good tee up for the woman to my right. Robin Turner is really like the person who really gave me a big shot as far as like jumpstarting my career right now and being able to support journalists and newsrooms and recruiting in that way. I had the opportunity to start supporting the newsroom, recruiting for Politico, which is very much like ad committee work and operational work, but working with the internship in PJI, which Robin was really leading. It was like the first time that I was actually really able to be involved in the process and kind of helping to have a hand in the strategy, the selection, kind of what we're looking for holistically to round out our PGI class, our internship class, et cetera, but then also what are the skills and qualities that hiring managers and editors are looking for from the newsroom side as well too. So like that opportunity was really what jump-started my career. It got me on a Zoom in front of Krista Thompson, who's formerly at the Washington Post, who ultimately hired me at the Post 2 years later. Applying for the role at Politico, but similar to what Tim said as well too, when I was not supporting the newsroom, it was very evident to our newsroom and to journalists and to editors how much I respected their work, how much I wanted to contribute. So then when that opportunity came for me, I think that they were a little bit more receptive to working with me in a way that they had not worked with recruiters previously, just because they felt that this was someone who was bought in and understood the work that they were doing and some of the nuances that go into recruiting for journalists in particular.
Could you tell them what PJI is?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you, Phil. Thank you, Phil. PJI is a 2-week intensive program for really mostly towards like, I would say like the sophomore age of college students, sometimes a little bit younger, sometimes a little bit older, but ultimately for individuals who might not be coming from those traditional journalism backgrounds, like they might not be in a J school right now, or they're not coming from quote unquote powerhouses of J schools like the Mizzous or the Howards or what have you. We're also thinking about ways where there are individuals coming from different geographic parts of the country as well too. But that background, again, bringing them into DC for a mix of classroom learning, but also a chance to visit different newsrooms. They have the chance to work and produce a story for Politico and work with an editor. So kind of like Phil was saying earlier, for individuals who might not have clips or might not have a robust array of clips, it's a chance to develop that, number one, but also have it in a publication like Politico that could be useful as they're applying for jobs or networking in the future. Good luck.
Yeah, I'll go. I actually got my start in sport management, so I was not interested in anything journalism at the start of my career. I was actually in sales for a long time, and then COVID happened, and I was like, okay, well, are we even gonna have sports? Is this going to be a thing anymore? So I eventually started looking on the job market. I was really always interested in building relationships with people, and that was something that I felt like I always had a knack for. So I started to look at my transition as to like, okay, I know that I like to, build relationships, talk to people, and connect people with opportunities. So I was like, HR is the best way to go about that. So I eventually got a role in legal recruiting, which is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. I don't know if you know anything about document review, but it's like thousands of documents that legal professionals have to go through. And I was having to like staff projects of like 100 people on these projects. And it was just completely insane. Staffing recruiting is super, super hard and very intense. So I started doing that, and then I realized that I wanted to do this more life cycle recruiting and doing it for like the full life cycle. So essentially from when you're interviewing for the job until you actually get the job, and even sometimes a little bit after that. So I actually had a friend that knew somebody that worked at Axios, and they were looking for an associate to help out on their recruiting team. So I was like, okay, I'm looking for an opportunity. I'll, roll with this. And I eventually worked my way up to being an editorial recruiter here. And it's something that I really found a lot of passion for. I like what Axios stands for. I like the local mission. I like what our reporters do. I like what this industry does in all. And I feel like I really found a knack in it. So I would say that I think while you all are like here and trying to figure out what works and what makes sense for you, you just never really know where life will take you. So you should be open to all opportunities, especially in this job market.
It's a really good segue to how I jump started my career, which was probably before any of the panelists when they jump started their careers here. But one thing that resonated with me then and now is curiosity. I'm just a very curious person. I'm a lifelong learner, and it jump started my career because I asked questions. I tried to find the answers. I was patient to research. What that landed me with was this little job on Capitol Hill with a bureau at the time of community newspapers. I'm talking teeny tiny, like Oneonta, New York, and Enterprise in California, and in Mississippi. These dailies were all over the country, and I was willing to help find local angles for them. And just asking questions, just wanting to understand what was going on in the nation, understanding journalism as a public service. And I walked into that job, and I'm embarrassed to tell you how little I made, but I was so thrilled to have that opportunity. What happened with that was, nail your job, but always branch out and give yourself a promotion. And my curiosity allowed me to do that, which led to the AP award you were speaking of on national religious trends. And Gallup poll came along and said, we want to do that with you. When people see that you are serious about your craft, kind of, it will make room for you. I really believe that. So for me, it meant a strong start. I still love, Tim Lampley will talk about this, local journalism, the local news, so important in our public service and to our democracy. And so that's where I learned to branch out because they needed all the help they could get. That allowed me to do big, ambitious projects. I did my little assignments, but I always did what drove me, what I wanted to learn more about. And I pitched those, and I'd be able to report on those. And that led to a career. I'll make this short. One day I was giving my report in our annual meeting for the Bureau, which involved our parent company. And I didn't know the people in the room. And I was just sharing with them, what our data was from our wire service. At the time, it was wire service, there was no digital. And on the break, I went out and a man walked up to me and said, "So you did all that, but you're hired to do this?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I want to hire you." And that man was from the Wall Street Journal. And that instinct is what I'm telling you, that drive, that curiosity is what caused me. I didn't know I was giving an interview. I was doing my assignment by giving my report. But when I went out into that hall, I got hired for a larger role. And all I'm saying is that, even in a marketplace as competitive as this, you only need one job each at a time. Okay, you might work more than one job at a time, but at least, don't let the numbers discourage. That's how I got my biggest jump start.
Thank you all for sharing that. I think an important through line in all of that was they're very passionate, they're ambitious, and don't discredit or be discouraged about starting off an internship or a fellowship. I think these can still lead you to a strong career in journalism. Speaking of jobs, we often joke that, applying for jobs is a job in itself. It takes a long time to apply for jobs and to find jobs that you like, to be organized with, your job hunt. And many students in this room are probably, at points in their career where they're applying for jobs, internships, fellowships. And so I'd love it if each of you could give, a piece of advice about how to stand out, whether it's the application or the interview. What's something that students should be very cognizant of when it comes to their applications and applying for jobs?
Yeah. I think I'll speak maybe like specifically for, again, I'll try to be like general, but also kind of give like some specific examples, at least for me coming from the Post. I think one thing for sure is that we at the Post are definitely like still a very manual like shop. So I know there's, we had talked about maybe like talking about like AI, just kind of like that, role in like early career journalists, both in your work, but then also again, like in even navigating the job market. We do not use AI on our side of things, like at the Post. So like I read every application for every job you get. And one thing that I'll say is that the cover letter, especially for us in the news business, is like so critical. It's for us like it is, I guess, like quote unquote like optional. Like you could fill out your application and submit your resume, and like your application will go through, but it won't make it past like that, like for us, because like we have so many applications for a role that like the first thing we look at is the complete application, like number one. So like that's the first thing I'll say. But just like for the cover letter, just in general, it's used very highly both by like our hiring managers, just to see like how individuals write, also to get a sense of how they understand the role. Obviously, you haven't talked with anyone about the role, but just based off of what you see in the job description, based off of your take and kind of like how you would approach that role, your ideas, how your past experiences, like what was it about that job, whether it is like your passions, whether it's I've done this in the past and I think this is really going to set me up for success in this role. Like that's your place to really illustrate that. The other thing I'll say is whether it is a former manager that you've had an internship, whether it's a professor or just someone that you feel that is like a trusted advisor for you, I would always like bounce your packets like off of them, like just to get a sense of like, hey, this is what my resume looks like right now. I just have this project I've started, I've incorporated this, or I just did this. How should I have this reflected? I'm happy to do that for you all as well too. So I'm sure you get my contact after this, but if you have questions about that, I'm happy to kind of give you all that feedback. But yeah, just finding someone that you trust that can kind of give you that consistent feedback on your application packets, especially from the cover letter standpoint, I think is a great way to help you stand out as you're going through the actual process.
Okay, you gonna read ours too? I would say for me, these are the experts. I'm really not a recruiter in any way, but sometimes I'm on hiring boards. So like right now, we're hiring a breaking news editor, and so it's I can't speak to like the cover letter things. That's already, by the time you get to like myself, I'm already assuming that they already did their jobs. But usually, what I'll say is that I know people are looking for a new perspective, because if people will send me their stories and ask if they should be included, like their clips or their stories, wherever, and ask if they should be included. And usually I'm looking at it and I'm like, I have no idea if you really wrote this. This is probably heavily edited. Like an editor, and I'm an editor, I know when somebody is writing something and when somebody is really heavily edited something. And so that including like your clips doesn't really tell me anything. But what does tell me something is the new ideas or new perspective that you added within the story. So if this is a story I'm reading, I'm like, okay, this is actually interesting. This is something that, dang. Or actually, the best thing is like when I'm thinking, man, I wish HuffPost had wrote that. That is like really great. I know we've all probably thought about that. Like, man, I wish the Post, I wish Wall Street Journal had wrote that. When I'm thinking that, I'm like, okay, that's something that I can actually take and discuss with you. Like, okay, this is a new perspective that you uniquely have, that maybe somebody in our newsroom doesn't have, and this as underrepresented people in the newsroom, that's one of our superpowers, right? So I would say, your clips are not as important as your actual thoughts and your perspectives on the world and how that perspective shapes, a newsroom. So I would be thinking about that. And then in interviews, I think it's really important to understand the outlet that you are applying to. A lot of people apply to HuffPost and have no idea what we do. I ask people like, okay, have you read a story from us? They're like, oh yeah. I'm like, okay, what story? So I think it's helpful to really. It's tough because, like I said, we are all looking for jobs right now, but you do have to spend some time actually looking into the newsroom that you are trying to work at, because you're going to hopefully work there, but you hate it, right? Like you might hate it, or you might not enjoy the coverage or whatever. I think it's just important to kind of look into that.
If I could say that a million times over again, please make sure you do your research on the media organizations that you are applying for. I think that's so important, and you really have to align it to what you're looking for long term. If you know you want to do investigative journalism, it doesn't make sense to apply for a company like Axios. We just don't do investigative work. Like, it makes more sense to go to maybe a Washington Post, maybe going to a ProPublica. Like, I think you really do have to be strategic in your job search. Like, you do have to really fine tune and do your research. Okay, I know that Axios does a lot of newsletters and they do a lot of like local news. If I want to go in that route, I should be applying for those types of jobs, and I should be looking for those types of opportunities versus, applying for a ProPublica or another organization that does longer form stories. I've sat on calls where people have told me verbatim, like, I don't really like writing short form. I only like writing long form. And I'm like, I don't really know why we're having a conversation right now. And I know you're not going to understand like everything about the companies and all the nuances, but if I could stamp that a million times, just make sure you do a little bit of research, spend a little bit of time, and don't be afraid to use ChatGPT. Like, you don't have to obviously use it as a search engine. To your point, we don't use it. I still look at applications manually. Like, we don't use it as far as like utilizing to go through applications, but we do utilize it as far as our processes and our day-to-day work. We do have a partnership with ChatGPT, so we're able to utilize it in a way that can make things just a little bit easier. So, for instance, some of our reporters will use it for like news roundups, so they can see what the Huffington Post is doing, they can see what the Washington Post is doing, some of these other
More for
media
research.
organizations. Yeah, really more for research. So I would say utilize it as that. Like, I've done things where I've put in my resume and said, hey, like, if you were a recruiter looking at this, what are the gaps in my resume in comparison to like this other role that I'm applying for? And then it will break down like, okay, you don't really show a lot of like leadership skills, and this role is a senior level role. So you need to show and like break down your experience to where you have that senior leadership like highlighted in your resume. So you can utilize that. There's so many ways now. And I do think it's important to have somebody trusted to like look over your resume, but don't underutilize ChatGPT, but don't overutilize it either. Like, you have to find a fine balance, but I really do think that you should utilize it to your advantage. You have it, it's not going anywhere. So I think that you should be able to, fine tune your resume, and then of course, be yourself. I think you get really like caught up in the interview process and like getting nervous and everything like that. But I think just being your authentic self and being true to who you are, which also aligns with the fact that you just have to do your research on these companies and make sure it aligns with what you're looking for long term.
Can I hop in there? On those applications, you absolutely must do your application. There's no way to get hired without legitimately applying, even though the process goes beyond your application. I want you to hear that very carefully too, because you want it to be clean, you want it to represent your best work, you want it to be true, factual, right? In addition to that, use the cover letter to show your unique thoughts. That's where you can really like bring in your ideas and how you think and what, even just one example, those things will help you stand out. But so will the conversation in the elevators. So will your LinkedIn connections. So will your, the way you present in your classroom. That's why people like I like to come as guest speakers in a college classroom, because I see you in your environment among your peers. I've done more hires that way, more recruitment efforts that way, because I'm hearing the questions. I'm hearing how you think. This says a lot about who you are that never shows up on your application. So don't discount your exposure. So programs like in internships and programs like what Terrell was talking about. When I helped create PJI some 14 years ago, that's Politico Journalism Institute, right? Institute. It was created and is for journalism students, absolutely. Do you have to have a journalism major? Not necessarily, but you have to be able to articulate and crystallize your thoughts of how, what questions are you getting answered? In fact, that's one of the application, the exercise. So can we just poll real quickly who's in the room? Like, are we sophomores? Raise your hand. How many juniors? How many seniors?
So you all in print? Going into
Digital first or print? That's important to know for even how we answer these questions.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
I would say that you seniors, you juniors should have a robust LinkedIn network. And, letting people you meet who are in the industry read back a story that you did, give their thoughts on it. I would also say in the application or resume or package itself, not only what have you put on it, but what have you left out? What have you left out? Numbers that quantify how many pieces you wrote a week. Engage with readers if you have any traffic information. When you go about editing your resume the way you do a news story, what is left out? And then make yours a little richer. That'll help it stand out for whoever reviews it.
And for those who, I guess, are we recording this? So they can't see the rest of the room. So the majority of the people in the room are focused on print and are seniors, right? Okay. My advice now, Report for America is kind of different in that we open a lot of jobs during one cycle a year. Our jobs are open right now. So if you'd like to apply, you go to reportforamerica.org, find the application, and apply to any of the jobs that you might align your talents with. But we get the question all the time, how do I stand out? Because we get, let's say we'll have 107 jobs last year. We got about 1,200 applications. We get a lot of applications. Everybody's wondering, how do I stand out? I would say, and I get this from the people who look over the applications, is they really want you to be prepared to basically be able to write for any medium. And be, show your range, yes. You know, you have to treat your application and your resumes almost like a story. You have to highlight things, you have to emphasize things, your achievements. You really have to go into it and think on the other side. Someone else is looking at what you're presenting. You know, that it's really important too that maybe you get feedback from mentors and people that you trust, your professors, as you are, you know, going along this journey as well.
So Tim, you're talking really about value proposition.
Exactly.
Your skills being multifaceted. You don't have to be a master of all of it, but to have done some things on audio, video, know how to tell your story.
Yeah, and like Coy was saying, learning how to use AI to your advantage, all of those things are important because things are changing so quickly in this business. You
I
have to
did
be
want to
ready to
highlight, I'm sorry. I just wanted to highlight too, I like the fact that you mentioned about like making sure you're showing your skills and what you can do and making it quantifiable, because that is a question that I always have, that hiring managers always ask me, like, how many stories are they writing? Like, how many hits did you get? Like, they want to see those numbers, and it's really good for you to have that written down on the page and make it transferable, even if it's not, like, say you're in broadcast journalism and you are applying for like a digital role, like those are transferable skills. It's just the way that you package it in your resume. You can tweak that, and like Tim was saying, utilize AI and all these other resources and all these other networks of people to your advantage to be able to tweak that, because when people just see, oh, I reported on like this story, sometimes they get a perception that they think you can't write, especially in broadcast journalism, and then I have to do all that work on the back end and say, no, I talked to them and we talked it out, and she said that she wrote all of this beforehand. So I think it's just really important to make sure you're fine-tuning your resume, and you really, in this moment, because there's so many people in the job market, you really have to be really strategic. And I hate to say that you have to like look at one job description and look at your job and like fine tune it to each job, but it's almost to that point because it's just so competitive now.
I just want to add one thing too. I think it's really important to know your portfolio at the back of your hand. Don't send clips that you had not read yourself in 5 months. You should know what you wrote. You should be able to ask questions about or answer questions about your journalism. I'm obviously not a hiring manager, but I've been on internship committees, and there've been times where I've asked a candidate, "Oh, you wrote about the story. How did you, come across the story idea? You wrote about this in your lead. Can you talk to me a little bit more about how you found said document?" And more times than not, students are kind of like taken back by that. So that is one thing that like journalists, editors are looking for. Like, you should know your clips. So if you haven't done that in a while, read up on what you're sending in these applications. Make sure your clips are very polished, your portfolio is clean, because people do look at that. And good, hiring managers, good editors are going to have questions for you about that. So my next question for the panelists, moving on to when students will maybe get offers for internships, jobs, fellowships. Sometimes they'll have 2 offers at once, or multiple offers at a time. And so what is something that students should consider when weighing their offers? What's a green flag for a newsroom, maybe some red flags, when these decisions, when the time comes to make these decisions, what are things that students should consider when picking one job over another?
I will say something briefly because that's not really, my area, but as a professional broadcaster, I did have a friend ask, he interviewed at 2 television stations, and one of them was, you have to join a union in St. Louis. So one of them was with IBEW and the other was with AFTRA. And I said, well, do you want to be shooting all the time? Because if you are a photographer, or mostly a photographer and a reporter, you would join the IBEW union. And if you're going to be on air, you'd be part of the, actually, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. So I was looking at the unions in that regard, and I don't know what that applies in print.
I think that when you're thinking about this sort of thing, I mean, Jess, you and I had the
Yeah.
conversation. I don't know if it's off the record.
No.
Okay, cool. No, it's too late. Well, I mean, but the point is, I think it's helpful to reach out to people that have been in the field or the industry a little bit longer than you and have more experience, because maybe they know people at these newsrooms. Like, so when you and I were talking about, the opportunity between the 2 newsrooms that you were looking at, I mean, I knew people both at Chronicle and the other places you were looking at. And so some of that comes from being a part of an association, right? Now this is the shameless plug. So WABJ, the Washington Association of Black Journalists, is a organization of over 500 journalists, students, communication professionals, media professionals. I mean, even influencers now, influencers and all the gamut, like all across. And in that organization, you're able to find people that have all of these different experiences. And there's no point in being in the organization,
That's right.
which is only $10 for students. There's no point in being
your president.
I am the president. But there's no point in being in the organization if you aren't reaching out to people that are there for you. And I get to use my privilege as president to force my members to be like, hey, you need to talk to students. So there's no point.
And
in
we
being
want to. We want to talk to students.
Exactly, right? So, I'm just plugging that there. But I think it's useful for people to use that network. It's there for you. People want to help, but you have to be able to reach out.
So he's saying you can do your industry intelligence from your professional organization. That's why you want to acquaint yourself with people who have a little bit more experience, as you say.
Exactly.
I would add to that list, though, multiple offers. That's a great dilemma in this particular era, especially. I would look at corporate values. Look on the website of the company. What do they believe? What do they say they believe? What do they espouse? Look and see what they put first and what they put last, because they order it in their prioritization also. If that's important to you, that's something you want to read. It's going to also inform you about what your experience is going to be like in that shop. I would look for development. If I'm talking to a member in WABJ who works there, what are the opportunities for development and training, and how closely do the editors work with emerging or young journalists? I want to know what that looks like, or am I just going to be flying solo? Where you have strong structure and development training, you're more likely to grow. And in that beginning 3 years, I would say 3 to 5, you want to grow as much as you can. I mean, you never stop growing, but that's going to be critical to how you solidify yourself in your career. And then the other thing I would say to look at is how do people advance who've been working there for a while? How long have you been working at XYZ? Oh, and so how long have you been in this role? And what, you can do that kind of conversation in networking reception events or on LinkedIn, however you communicate with your contacts. And then retention. Retention's only part of the story because no one's loyal to anyone these days. But where a company seems to have problems keeping, that team staff, it's usually pointing to a morale problem in this room.
I think one thing I would like to add on the negotiation part is when I'm going into conversations with people, I would recommend that you always give a range. Don't ever just pigeonhole yourself to one salary. I think that's just advice for my younger self that I wish I would have told myself as well. I think it just gives you a little bit more leverage and a little bit more to come to the conversation with when you're talking about like, when you have to get down to the brass tacks. You have to be realistic about what is gonna make sense for you, but you also have to be realistic about your experience as well. And I know those conversations are very awkward and they can be uncomfortable, but you kind of have to, you know, kind of do your research, figure out and talk to other people that are part of maybe WWJ and say, you know, have those conversations. How much were you making like when you
Do
started
your
out?
research.
Yes.
Back
How
to
much,
that.
yeah, how much were you making? Look at where the market is now and then do and put yourself in a good position. If you know you want to make $60,000, but the range is 40 to 60,000, like tell them that you need something maybe a little bit above that or a little bit in the middle of that so they can work up to that and so that they can manage your expectations too, because we have to also go back to our hiring leaders and our hiring teams. And when you come with like one number that you want to switch it in the middle of the interview process, then that gives us red flags. And then the hiring managers are like, well, do they really want this role or do they have other roles? So I think you just have to really do your research and really give us a range that is gonna be comfortable, that you're comfortable.
And I guess on that, could you guys talk about maybe like negotiating your salary for the first time? I think, you know, sometimes it can be intimidating for people that are coming in with maybe only internship experience, but if you know that you want a little bit higher salary. And also, what are some things outside of salary that you can negotiate as a career journalist?
The first thing you should really pay attention to is your market.
Yes.
So you're not going to negotiate necessarily the same pay in Ohio as you will in Washington DC or in New York, right? Cost of living is totally different. So you want to be understanding your market and the cost of living, right? Your average rent, you know. And make use of reviews like PayScale and Glassdoor. They do have salary ranges listed for those companies. They're not exact, but it'll give you an idea of where about that position, you know, is paid in that newsroom. Just to give you some relative information. National Press Club also has information on this, and so does the US Census. So, I mean, you can at least see if you're competitive, if the company is, you know, giving you a competitive range by looking at those different data points. In some states, they have to post what they have budgeted for that salary, and they play games with that too. But it gives you an idea. Virginia is an exception for the rule. They don't have to post the salaries.
So I think, is it still $7?
I don't know, but it's a different animal. But so those are some of the ways to at least know if you're in your ballpark. And your peers, you guys talk to each other. You know, you're a lot more transparent about your salaries and your pay than several generations ahead of you, you know, when people were more competitive. And I think that collective brain work is important for everybody. So those are some good ways to go about it. In terms of strategy, I think that on your first job, you want the job. You know, you want to be able to afford to live and you want the job. And as ambitious as you are, go for it. It never hurts to counter, but be realistic. Because when you come in and you make an unrealistic value, it calls into question your judgment and it calls into question your maturation and a lot of other things that can affect what kind of roles you get. You want to start off on a really good footing. And there are other ways. There's off the record comp time and paid time off. You know, there are other ways. And I think, Terrell, you might want to speak to some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jasper asked like other things you can negotiate, and Robert mentioned is definitely like your PTO. Like that's something that you should definitely like look at.
PTO.
Yeah, like your paid time off. Again, like looking at you know, what if you want to negotiate for that as well. I think another resource, Tim, you had mentioned this when you were talking about like unions, but for example, like the Post, we are of a union shop. So for a lot of individuals that are stepping into roles, 9 times out of 10, your role is going to be in the union. So we have pay ranges, we have a guild minimum as well too. Our union is also really receptive, kind of similarly when we're talking about like reaching out to individuals who may be a part of that newsroom, or part of that organization. If you're in that process, you could reach out to like members of like our guild, even if you're like on a perspective, like on the outside, and they can give you some insight like as well too. I think the other thing is also just being very, I would say, comes up a little bit to what Chloe was saying as well too, as far as like being communicative, but also like, you know, trust yourself and be true to yourself. Like I know, especially right from a negotiation standpoint, whether it's your first time, your 10th time, whatever, it can be a somewhat of a off-putting experience, or could kind of put you off your balance in a lot of respect. It's you versus what you feel like is the other side, and there's a number that represents your value, like quote unquote. So that can be, you know, tricky to navigate sometimes in a lot of respects, but lean into your value and like also like what you feel and like what you know. Especially I say that for speaking with recruiters. I'll somewhat speak to point here, but like if you talk to us and kind of share like, hey, this is what we're looking for, especially when you have that first recruiter conversation, like we're your advocates as well too. So understanding, hey, this is what I'm looking for based off what I understand for the job, and also based off of what I need for myself personally, my own life situation. We're not going to be like, you're terrible for thinking that or for asking that. Like we might say like, hey, like the top of our range is this, like, and just be realistic with you. But also there's countless times that on the other side, I have gone to a hiring manager and say, hey, this person is looking for 10K over our range, but they're worth it. Like they're fantastic. So if we want this quality, like let's be eyes wide open about that going into it. So I think that's one thing that I would share as far as like kind of like going into the negotiation period to be mindful of.
And if it's a non-union shop, you can even say, okay, if I come in at this salary, can we revisit based on my excellent performance, my salary in 6 months? And that's another way to be creative in a non-union shop.
And I really applaud this group, this generation, because they will do that.
Yes.
When
yes.
we started out, we were a little bit more timid about doing that type of thing.
Oh, it's
We'll ask for those salaries and say, listen, you know, this is what I expect. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't give, now I don't know if you guys would do this, I wouldn't give a salary when asked
That's
first.
right. That's right.
I wouldn't do that. I would ask about the range and say if that's within my range, but I wouldn't do that. The great thing about Reports for America, if you go to our jobs, we publish all of the salaries, so you can see if that fits in with what you would like to make. We do insist that the newsrooms that we partner with have a living wage, so they have to do the MIT living wage calculator. And that is how, hopefully they pay well above that. But at least, we go through a lot to find the right people for our jobs. And so we would like to have people who don't want to leave after a year or two because it's salary or because they don't like the newsroom. So we do a lot to vet the newsroom for a number of things.
Great. I would say one other thing you can do to negotiate, and I'm thinking of this, one of the things, my last job, and what I really push for in the organization is to have this flexibility. Everybody knows what 401k is. So you're paying yourself, right, when you contribute to it, because it's your savings, right? And your employer will match it up to 1% of your income, right? Sometimes that seems a far way off when you're coming out of college, or maybe your calculus or strategy is I need to pay off the student loans. So one of the things I argued for was to allow early career journalists to opt to pay into their student loans, and you match your student loans. Now that is one way to pay yourself. When you talk about negotiation, you might not be able to move the salary very much, but if they have flexibility to allow you to pay your student loan, and they give you the percentage match, whatever would have gone into your 401k, the company can put into your student loan. More companies are starting to do that. And I certainly advocate for at least the first couple of years out of college, because you have student loans that have interest, right? So as much as you want to maximize your 401k for retirement, a quick way to get there sometimes is to get the student loan zeroed out first. So that's, we can talk more about that after the panel, if you have questions on it.
Yeah, and I'll just say, like, one thing I've done, now results may vary. If the job has to really like you, but if you have another offer, I have gone to a job that was about to give me an offer and told them, I do have another offer for another position, they're paying this much, can you come in or come in higher than that? And they did. So, results may vary, but it's one option you can do if you're really confident and, you know that our offer is better. One last question for the panelists before we open it up to our audience here. What is one thing that our journalism students can do today to give them, strong, chance at a strong career once they graduate?
As you all can see, I had nothing to say about that part because I'm a victim. I didn't know any of that. I'm still trying to make money back. I think the best thing right now is just to be open to a lot of different beats. So everybody I know wants to cover sports or cover entertainment, which is fine. It's like there's nothing wrong with that. I got into this field by being somebody, being a Black man from the Midwest that was covering politics, or covering just political journalism, which you automatically stand out. Like that's just it. You automatically stand out.
Yes.
And so I think there are other beats that are so interesting if you give them a chance, right? So like climate, tech. There's a person who created energy. There's a person who created a beat right now about covering like influencers, right? Like, which is weird, right? But like people cover influencers.
Mhm.
There are beats that you can even create that are happening right
That's
now.
smart.
So I think it's just important to look at the world and be like, okay, if there's something that's missing, or is there a beat that's not being covered, or is there something that I can add to this conversation? Because there's so much out there online. How do you break through? And are there beats that you can cover that are just where maybe you're underrepresented? So I would just take a look at that. Or even if we're talking about sports, there are not as many people covering sports, investigative journalism, for example, right? Like everybody wants to be the person with the mic and saying stuff, right? But what are you actually saying? So I think it's really important to think about the beats and just be open to different ones. That's it.
That's a good, yeah, I would definitely say that. I was actually just talking to them about that because we're still hiring technically for a senior technology reporter, and that salary is what, 85 to 175? And like companies are paying for those niche topic areas and for those expertise.
Absolutely.
So, and I know people are very passionate about talking about like underrepresented communities, and I think that sometimes we do ourselves a disservice when we pigeonhole ourselves to just those beats in particular. You can talk about those communities in tech. You can talk about those communities in sports.
Absolutely.
You can do all of those things. So don't pigeonhole yourself and say, oh, because I want to talk about my community, I can only do it in this way. Like there's so many ways you can do that.
Right.
Megan Dickey, one of our former reporters, who was a tech reporter, she was able to do that and has really shined a light on like the underrepresented communities as being a Black woman in tech, being a tech reporter. So I just think that you really have to expand your mind and be open to finding your niche and finding your expertise, because like you were saying, like your companies will pay for that. Like if they really like you, they'll find roles for you. I've hired so many people where we actually didn't have a role for it, but we just created it because they have so much expertise in that particular field and people want to know about it. So to Phil's point, just be open.
I agree.
I think that you should invest in yourself, sure. Reach out to, let's say, places you'd like to work for, and tell them, if they haven't called you and said, listen, we'd like to hire you, then you're not being specific. So maybe you should just say, I'm going to be in your area. I'm going to be, somewhere near your station or near your newsroom. I wanted to know if we could get together and maybe I can come by and talk to you or something like that. That's how I got my first job. I just said I was gonna be in Southern Illinois and asked the supervisor if I could just come by and talk to him. And even though they weren't hiring at the time, I knew they had kind of a revolving door because it was a small market. And I knew if I made a good impression that when they had an opening, he would remember me because I wasn't coming in at the time they were doing interviews. I was just coming by, on my own accord. So got there, got hired maybe 6 months after that meeting. Also, I've been at conventions and I've said to people, listen, I know you're going to be at this convention. Do you have time for breakfast? That's before the career fair starts. So I might say, listen, can we get together just, maybe early that morning? And so now I have a one-on-one with somebody who's sitting at a table later on that day with a line of people. But I have my one-on-one with that person. So I use LinkedIn to reach out to people, connect with folks. So that was it.
I've done that. Don't underestimate a coffee chat, especially being in DC, where all these journalists from all over the world, a lot of their publications are based here. Reach out to people. People want to take student journalists under their wing, grab coffee with them, take advantage of that. And I guess one more thing that I'd add, kind of to Phil's voice point, is build your brand now. That was one thing that I was very intentional about when I was at Howard. I covered the heck out of HBCUs and issues when it comes to of course Howard, but also diversity in education. And that helped me, while it was a small level of expertise, that helped me get my fellowship of conflict higher education, where I was able to develop that even more. But they would have known that had I not been so intentional about that in college. So you should be on social media. I know sometimes it can be a crazy place depending on what app you're on. X is not what it used to be with Twitter, but it's still important to post your work, share your work. There's WBJ chat, the share your work channel, and the one to get your name out there. I think building your brand is very intentional. Phil is Mr. Build Your Brand. You see him on Twitter all the time, but that starts from him being consistent. So I think that's very important. That's the thing that you can do now this week. Dust up, or dust off your portfolio. Go on, your social media, see what you can share. Sometimes it can be a little cringy, to say, but I think ultimately that's what's going to put you ahead of the other people that are applying for the jobs. So now we're going to open it up to questions that you have for any of our panelists.
First things first, thank you guys for giving all the great knowledge. My name is Keith. I'm a senior. My question is, what was a challenging story that you guys reported on, and how did you overcome that?
Keith, a senior,
Journalism.
majoring in
Journalism, minor in political science.
what discipline?
Uh,
What area of journalism?
Digital journalism.
That's helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I did a story about a year and a half ago on small HBCU in Tennessee called Knoxville College. And the assignment that I was initially given was just a daily write-up, where I had to write about this college that had lost accreditation 30 years ago. It was reapplying for accreditation. It was just supposed to be maybe a 600-word piece. And what ultimately ended up happening was I just took some extra time to go on Google Maps and just look at the college, because I'm in DC, this is Tennessee. Obviously, it's not something that I can just walk out the street and go look at it. So I looked at Google Maps and I saw the buildings were abandoned and it was just in really rough shape. I went back to my editor and I was like, I think that there's something more here. This is alarming. And I just think there's a story here. And so, from there, I ended up getting on the phone with the president, and he did spin the story one way. It was here we are, we're going to come back, we're going to get accreditation. And I think there's an instinct to just kind of go with the first story that's given to you, especially from, administrators sometimes working in higher ed. But I think what separates an okay story from a great one is going the extra mile and being skeptical. I think one thing that is really important as a road career journalist is to flex your skepticism muscles. And there are things that you say that really just weren't adding up. And I'm also just nobody can really answer why continue? You guys clearly aren't taking care of it. Why do you want to get accreditation back? And so I ended up speaking to employees, former employees that worked there. I found a whistleblower, talked a lot about, you know, how the campus was financially ruined, but like they raised money and spent it on the president's salary. And we're doing, you know, all these different things. And I looked into the records of, you know, what was happening on a campus that they're just kind of letting sit abandoned and the impact that it was having on the community. And I did a public records request from some, like, you know, like some of the local agencies, and found out that because they hadn't cleared out the science room from 30 years ago, the lead that was just sitting in like some of those labs had like leaked into the drains and was poisoning the local community. And, you know, there was just a lot of like crazy things that I found, but I wouldn't, you know, gotten all that information had I not been a little bit skeptical. And so it was a really hard story from, you know, start to finish, mostly because I had to do it all from DC. I did not get to, you know, go out to the campus. And so, you know, there are times when I was speaking to people on the weekends, or I was calling up, you know, the schools and local barbershops to speak to residents. And I spent hours just going through police records and documents and, you know, building my expertise in areas that I previously had no knowledge in, like accreditation, and also just like crime and courts, like all these things that I had to do in areas of expertise that, you know, I didn't come in having, that I built up through that reporting process. And I think overall just helped me, one, like you said, like be skeptical. Don't go with the first story that you're given. Sometimes it is okay, you should push back on an angle, especially if it's something that you can advance a narrative on. And yeah, I mean, I think one benefit is I spent a lot of time like combing social media for that story. And I think, you know, as a career journalist, that is an advantage that you have. Like, you're very familiar, you grew up with the internet. Use that to your advantage in your reporting. You know, I was finding people's phone numbers because I like, you know, stalked them on Facebook and cross-referenced it to the phone books. And there's things you can use. So that was a story that I did maybe 4 months into my fellowship, my first like post-grad opportunity. And that story, you know, really held kind of like my career from there. I mean, I've always been out of school for 2 years now, which is crazy to think about. But that story opened up a job opportunity for me in a lot of ways. And I continue doing other bigger stories after that. But that one I think was the one that got the attention of, you know, higher management at my job when I was just a fellow, and opened up a lot of opportunities for me later on.
Thank you.
Judge, I think you're the only one that like still writing like, right now. Like, I don't still writing that. Yeah.
Did you say phone book?
Yeah, so the US phone book, this is, let me click that. So US phone book, I can't even say, let me click that. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, everyone's number is just very sensitive. But yes, the US phone book, usphonebook.com. It's like, you can search anyone's name. And I don't have LexisNexis in my newsroom, which is a source that, you know, journalists use to find people's information. So what I would do is, you know, I would search their name, and then to make sure that it was them, I would enter the number that would pop up on a Cash App, and then I would confirm it that way. So like, yes, that's what I would do. That's what I still do. It's so worried.
That's cool.
Other questions?
Hello, my name is Denver Hunt. I am a sophomore journalism major from Jacksonville, Florida. Go Jacks.
Florida.
My question is, I transferred to Howard recently. I completed my AA in mass communication at Florida State College of Jacksonville. And when I came here, I was very excited, but I also felt like I had to catch up. So how do you deal with the feeling of, even in like the professional sense, like you see your peers and, you know, people always say, well, you should be confident in your own work, but it still sometimes like gets you like, oh, I gotta catch up. Like I'm always there. The goalpost is always moving because people are doing such amazing work. So how do you combat that in a professional sense, and what do you do to make yourself feel better? Like just build your confidence up, boost your own confidence.
I think one thing I would say is like, just going off literally what you just said, is that also recognizing that everyone else's goalpost is also moving. Like it's very, your race is literally, it's not the same race as everyone else's. Like everyone's race is a different distance. They're starting at a different point. They're at a different point in that race. And sometimes, I'll say this specifically for me a little bit to your back. Like when I stepped into the post, I had a lot of that feeling of, wow, this is an institution that I have admired for a really long time. I remember when one of my first or second week there, I got on the elevator and Eugene Robinson was getting off the elevator and I was paralyzed. I was like, wow, and it's just like, I'm in this place and it's like, man, I got a lot of catching up. Like I said, like I started working at Politico in 2018, but really supporting the newsroom not until 2020. And then in 2022, I'm working at the Post as, can you help us hire a features editor? And I was like, okay. But I also, it's like, one thing to kind of help you, I think, get over that is to get going. I think so, to not necessarily kind of sit in that, oh man, like people are so far past me or they've already started going. Once you start getting going, you'll only start thinking about yourself. And I don't mean that in like a selfish way, but like you'll really start to hone in and focus on your race and like what you're doing to better yourself. And especially with journalism and in a career like journalism, it's a lot of thought and a lot of energy that you should put into yourself. And that's ultimately where you're going to get the highest level of return. So yeah, sometimes it can be like hard to like keep that that motto or that ethos like consistently, but when you can get back to that, I think it's helpful.
Totally agree with what Terrell says too, because I remember my first job, Roy Johnson, you guys know Roy? Roy covered sports for a number of years, wrote books on Magic Johnson, I think Charles Barkley. He sent me a note and he said, every pathway to success has a starting point. It gets better, just hang in there. At some point, you will become an expert saying to the younger people, hang in. So just keep going. If that's what you're on the pathway where you want to go, just keep going. I remember when I first started out doing interviews in my career, nervous. You sit down and you talk to people, you're just like, oh my God, it's that imposter syndrome. It's that, should I be sitting here in this position talking to the mayor or whomever it is? And now, fast forward years, I come in the room and I understand that people are waiting on me to control this atmosphere, to take control of what I am about to do. I come in the door, I say hi to everybody, I'm prepared, I've done my research, I'm no longer that 21-year-old who started out really nervous. I tell them to turn up the lights, put me on the camera here, let me see, put his words up, let's see if that title is correct. Here's what we're going to do, we're gonna go over this, then we're gonna go here, come up on my camera here. I'm now, because I hung in there and I believed in myself. So it gets better.
Yeah, I think you'd be well served to just pay attention to your race and what you're doing. I remember when I was an intern, I was in a scrum with a bunch of other reporters, and in the middle of the scrum was John McCain, and I was the person who I was kind of shadowing for the day. It said like, hey, go over there and ask Senator McCain how he feels about Marco Rubio missing all these votes in the Senate, because at the time he was running for president. And I went over there. This was probably the most nervous I've ever been, because I was like, I'm getting in this scrum because you got to fight these, and these are like professionals. These are like actual like journalists. At that point, I was an intern, and so I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna just get my question out. So I was just like, okay. I took my time, and I was just like, I called him. I was like, Senator Rubio, can you please? And everybody stopped and looked at me because I just called out Senator McCain. Everybody just looked at me and was like, who is this? I thought I died, basically. I was like, oh, it's over. I'm never going to work in DC ever again. But he looked at me and was just like, oh, well, Senator Rubio is much more handsome than I am. And then he answered my question. And people laughed, and that was it. That was the end of it, right? And so now, fast forward later, all those years later, I really do feel as though, these things sort of happen. You always kind of feel like, like you feel inferior. But then the older I get, I'm like, man, there are a lot of mediocre people in this industry. There are a lot of like Nepo babies in this industry. There are a lot of people who are like, they're just in this industry And I think you're just better served not even comparing yourself to what other people are doing, because that's energy that you should be putting into yourself, right? And kind of chiseling yourself and getting yourself, working yourself and making sure you are the best product that you can be.
You can say something.
Yeah, I wanted to compliment you, actually, because you have to take every moment you have to do your breakthrough. And you made a point, I guarantee you made a point of not only saying who you were, but you told something about yourself. And I guarantee you, there is at least one person other than you in this room who is gonna remember that you said go Jacks. And you just never know what the thing is. So I hope you do exude some confidence, and I hope you can keep that.
And it will grow, right? Enjoy the process. Because now you're learning, you get to make mistakes and be forgiven. But you're also in the seat of power. You have access, all of you here, to every national story, from these institutions. Like, not many colleges can say that. I mean, we have some here, but you have a unique perspective, being HBCU and, the heart of the nation's capital. So many historic people come to Howard's campus. I would begin to employ myself. I would say, Denver, so-and-so's gonna be here, Secretary of State, so-and-so. I'm gonna see if I can get an interview with that person. I'm gonna report it for the Hilltop. I'm gonna pitch this to XYZ board. Like, this is your time to take these kind of risks, and just based on your curiosity. And you will have perspectives and questions that no one on this panel will have. So I say enjoy the process, watch yourself grow. Measure yourself, set your own goals. See, did I get a clip this semester? Like, how many people write for the Hilltop? Or 101, what's the magazine?
We have 101 cover to cover, HBU service.
How many have clipped from one of those
told,
magazines? How many writes for the news service? Like, you all have opportunities here.
Any of you work for the radio station?
Yeah, HUR. So those are all
Spotlight.
opportunities that you have. And as you start doing that, you'll, rack up and learn with each one. Your confidence.
I would also say lean on your circle too. Like, who are your peers who are around you are probably feeling the same way you are. I think you really need to, in these moments, trust the process. It'll take time, but then also lean on your circle, because I'm sure there's other people in the same boat as you that are feeling the same way. And I think that will just help you understand, get perspective to say, okay, I'm not the only one feeling this way, and then just continue to grow and enjoy the process. You're gonna get there. It just takes time.
And one last suggestion I would say is, I think reading memoirs of journalists that you really admire was really helpful for me, because it's like, this is someone who's worked, I've read, I've studied, and hearing some of their own, insecurities, or the things they went through, the challenges they had, was really helpful for me. And I'll give you some recommendations after this.
Plus one to that.
Do you have a mentor?
I do in Jacksonville, and it's a little hard because I'm, like you said, when you're in a different place, and it's kind of hard to communicate right now because she's also a teacher. She used to work at the newspaper at my old college campus, The Experience magazine, where we did poems and we got students to submit art and just it wasn't very long form, it was very short form, but Jennifer Chase is one of my mentors. Love her down for everyone.
That's why they have more than one. And it might be a good idea to be strategic in the people that you also ask to be part of your network. Sometimes it's people who might potentially hire you one day as they watch you work. So, yeah.
Okay, we'll do these last questions.
Hi, my name is Israel Johnson. I'm a sophomore honors journalism major, political science minor at the School of Rock in Alpharetta, Georgia. And I had a question about kind of the career trajectory you see in this kind of current state of where journalism is headed. Because I feel like the common question I get asked when I tell people I want to be a journalist or I want to work in the media is how do you see that evolving under this kind of administration and like the First Amendment and how that's kind of evolving, because it seems like certain like truths and certain oaths as journalists are kind of evolving right now. And as experienced journalists, like both in broadcast and in print, I just wanted to know if that has affected you. You can see different like media companies sort of capitulating certain narratives, and I just want to know if that makes you feel capped at all at this point in your career, where you're like level to be able to tell a story, or like does it cap your voice at all?
Feels like hope. No, I actually do feel hopeful in this moment, because I think that people are now starting to realize like there are so many different ways to get their stories out there, right? So like I know when I started my career in the middle of the Trump campaign. So I've never known a journalism industry that was not hectic or chaotic. That's all I've known, right? And so
before,
yeah,
I promise.
yeah. So I don't know. I've never. It's always been like this for myself. But I think that I think it's useful to look at all of the different outlets that are blossoming out of this moment that we're in, right? So I know when I started, I was like, okay, one day I'm going to work at the New York Times, and that's it. Okay, now fast forward to today, where I'm like, wow, there are, obviously people want to work at the Times because this is a place that it looks to be a stable place to work. But now, knowing what I know now, I'm like, man, there are other opportunities to work at worker-owned outlets, or outlets that people have created independently, or now I'm looking at outlets that are funded by trust and other sorts of organizations that do believe in the free press. And so like what Ron was saying about really understanding what outlet that you're working for, I think is still important. That's why I've been in HuffPost for 10 years, right? Because I value what we cover and what we find to be important. That resonates with me, and that's why I haven't left. But there's other outlets that are popping up, even at the local level, right? Like the Baltimore Banner or the 51st, or like these other outlets that are trying to fill in different voids kind of all over the place. And so I think now, if I look back to when I started in journalism, I was like, okay, New York Times, I got to be there. I'm more grateful for today, where I've kind of evolved my thinking about how to produce journalism or how to do journalism. There's so many different opportunities to do it today than there were even 10 years ago. So I would say to explore different opportunities, and that might even be independent. Like now you can even do that independently. Like Substack didn't exist when I was, starting out. That's another option that people, I think even recruiters now even look at that. They look at the writing there and the work that you're doing on platforms like that. And you can actually put forward it as like clips.
That's
if I'm right.
Oh,
So I think that there is hope. There's hope for journalists today, for what we should be thinking about and how we can expand our thinking from just like a couple of outlets to like, okay, maybe there are other ways that we can produce journalism and still uphold democracy in the First Amendment.
And mediums too. I think that's like the other thing that I think about a lot too, as far as I think there's a perception that there is a decrease in the amount of news, and I think that is relatively true, but I think the people's desire for information is growing. I think people want the information, and we have a lot of different mediums in which to deliver information. So when information they can trust, and I think that's the vacuum. That's the vacuum that journalists can fill, and there are, so many. Like Phil had mentioned, like within WABJ, like I've had the opportunity to meet various different like influencers or that news influencer kind of like mix who have a audience or have a relationship with an audience that seems different than a quote unquote traditional journalist has, but they have met this audience in this space that has allowed them to kind of develop that relationship. There's nothing preventing journalists from being in those spaces. There's nothing preventing journalists from being on TikTok, on YouTube, like in these different new media, and then presenting format in similar way, as well too. But like Tim said, bringing forth and presenting that work and that content that is rigorously reported, factually accurate, that is something that can really break through and creates a lot of opportunity, again, whether it's at legacy news organizations, at worker-led organization, or even independently. It's never been easier for someone to do that as well too. So yeah, that's something I think about as well. It's like Phil said, but also just like the different mediums that are available as well too.
And I would say back to the point about being, open in terms of your experiences, especially starting out. All the exposure you can get. Don't write off trade publications. Don't write off niche publications. In some of those, especially if you're interested in that area that they cover, you're building expertise. And that one day can feed your beat when you arrive at a larger legacy or some other publication.
Like hers.
Yes,
About the informer, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Did you hear a question over here?
I do. Hello. Thank you so much for the insight that you shared thus far. I'm Misha. I am a senior journalism major, photography and military science double minor from Pompano Beach, Florida. Hey, girl. So my question is, what quality did you gain through experience, or what lesson did you learn that has deeply informed how you are now as a journalist? That you wish you would have known before, or that you wish you would have, somebody would have told you?
Could you repeat that?
I should have just read it. I wrote it down. So let me do that. What quality did you gain with experience, or what lesson did you learn that deeply influenced or impacted your career that would have been helpful for you to know earlier?
It would have been helpful for you to know earlier.
I know I'm not a journalist, but I think one thing that I learned that I took away from my time and still learning here too at Axios is everything is subjective. So it really depends on the perspective of what industry you're in, who you're talking to, who your hiring managers are, and what they're looking for. And I think you really have to hone in and own your expertise. I think you really have to trust yourself and trust your instincts and have really good discernment and good judgment, especially obviously all these people on this panel have that. That's why they've been successful in their roles here. So I think one thing that I've taken away from that is that you really just have to own your expertise and you have to trust yourself. You know your area of expertise. If you want to become a tech reporter, if you want to be a local reporter, if you want to be an editor, focus in on that and own that, because people will hire you for that. You don't have to know a little everything. I think in this day and age, you need to know a little bit of everything and kind of be familiar with it, but you don't have to be an expert in everything, but own your craft and be confident in that and be able to show that to these other media organizations and these other outlets so you can get those opportunities and again, not pigeonhole yourself to one thing.
Own your expertise. I love that.
Yeah, I wrote that down.
I think I would say learn to pitch. I think that there's so much to cover within academic curriculum that some of the most important skills, you're not going to get until it's experientially in the newsroom. Pitching stories it's a skill, and I wish I had learned that earlier. Whether I done a real tight nut graph and shown why this matters, who wants to read it and why, what readers will we reach, what sources will I interview, who would be good sources for this story. Crafting a really smart story pitch is important in your role, whether you on any platform, if you're doing video journalism, audio or digital first. And a lot of great stories never see the light of day because reporters or journalists don't pitch sharp proposals. I wish I had learned that earlier.
You know what, and that's a good point, but not only that, Robin, it would have been great to have come to interviews and
With
had
your story
3 or 5 stories or something,
That's
some
right.
original ideas, well researched,
That's right.
based on the newsroom that I'm talking to. That kind of sets you apart.
It really does.
So, yeah, that's a good idea. Also, in terms of things that I learned though, when I was at BET and I was working in the news department, I also was privy to a lot of the interviews with entertainers and how we went about trying to get those interviews. Learn what the letter looked like, the pitch, the idea of trying to get celebrities. And once I stopped working for BET, I became a freelancer for BET. Once I left DC, went back home, but I still freelanced. And I took all of that knowledge on how they obtain these interviews with celebrities, giving them a time frame and saying, hey, I just want 15 minutes and this is what I'm going to. All those things, I took that, and that's how I was able to sort of parlay that into a really successful freelance career with a lot of entertainers. Is learning that from that part. Now, in terms of regret, I wish maybe that I had been more confident during that time because I found myself in getting those interviews. I also found myself in positions where I could have done even more. Like, I remember standing next to Matthew Knowles. Is that his name? Beyonce's father. And I was at. We were given. I gotten the access to cover this concert, but didn't get the access to have an interview. But then he comes out and he's standing feet away from me. What I should have today, I would never have just let that. I would have said, hey, I'm Tim Lampley. Can we at least get 5 minutes? I mean, he had the power to do it. And he probably would have said, well, just hold on. Let me see. I can probably get you back there for maybe 3 or 4 minutes or something like that. So I wasn't confident enough. We just froze, me and the photographer.
Yeah,
That's
I guess
relatable.
it's like somewhat similar, but this is more like, I guess, like a quality versus like a skill. But something I wish I had previously that I think I have a pretty good handle on now is being comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that definitely could apply into journalism, into the work you're doing. But when I think about that, especially some of the work that Rob and I were doing at Politico in the EDI space, I think I learned in that period that I was pretty good at being able to deal with discomfort if I know what the end goal is. Like, I was very comfortable and become very comfortable. I was like, I'm willing to sit in this discomfort or have the uncomfortable conversation in order to push us towards greener pasture, or to sit in to have that conversation on behalf of someone else so they do not have to go through that, but ultimately that we get to the end goal that they're looking for. And I think from a journalism perspective, from a journalist perspective, I think like even Jasper had spoke about like just kind of like trusting your like skepticism and being able to, I'm going to ask this question, even though I know it might make my subject uncomfortable, but it's the question that deserves to be like asked in this moment. It's the question that our readers and our audience deserve to have answered right now. So I think for me, like as especially like younger in my or earlier in my career when I was younger, just didn't have that quality or just wasn't as comfortable with that myself. And I think just now, with years and just understanding and knowing myself a little bit more, I have developed that. So that's a quality that I would recommend.
Yeah, I'll say just real quick, be an early adopter to things. I wish I was more of an early adopter to video audio. I'm mostly in visual. I do not care for video and audio stuff. But I wish I, had been on TikTok and all these other funny platforms when they were first coming out. It's been helpful for me to do that. I'm on TikTok now. It's like too late now. We're like, I'm leaving now. So I don't know.
Never too late.
So it's helpful to get on whatever the new things are that people are using. Because if there's an audience there, then there's going to be people there that want to know about the world, right? So like there are probably some platforms that you know about that I don't know about. And then the second thing is just, definitely the uncomfortable part. There were times, I used to cover the White House a little bit. There were times where I was in the White House where there's like there's a media section. Now, I don't recommend this for covering the White House, which I've been in a couple times. But during the Biden White House, there were these media sections where you could kind of be in for like different events, and there would be like events, and there would be like maybe people you want to talk to on the other side. You can kind of, some people would like go over the line, which I was very nervous about doing because I'm like, no, I don't want to get tackled by the Secret Service or anything like that. But people would do it, and so I think I wish I was just a more. This might be bad stuff I'm covering because you could get arrested for this. I don't know, but I think that there are times where you can kind of just where you should want to push the envelope just a little bit as journalists. Like that's what you should be trying to do, because on the other side of that fence, there might have been a quote I could have gotten, or some conversations I could have had that would have been better for the purpose of the story that I was covering. So maybe not the best example, but going back to Rose' point about being uncomfortable, I think is important.
Well, that brings us to the end of our panel. I just want to thank each of our panelists for dropping so many gems and so much important knowledge about this industry, about your own individual career paths. I would encourage each and every one of you to connect with at least one of these people today before you leave. Get a business card, follow up on LinkedIn. Yes, during WFJ. Also, Sam here will be doing one-on-one interviews tomorrow related to the Report for America position. So definitely make sure you plan.
Sign up.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
I think you sent out something, right? About,
It's on the flyer too.
Yes.
And network, do that. Sometimes it's about who you know to get those, whether it's the internships or whether it's full-time jobs, so.
Network horizontally too.
Yes.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes.
Well, all right. Well, I
Sign it up?
Let's give it one more round. And one thing I neglected to do is this is sponsored by HBService.com, Department of Media, Journalism, and Film, and the BEST program. BEST stands for Black Executive and Student Training. And we have the founder here, Carolyn Ellison. She's been a big supporter of our department and has helped support a number of programs and events that we've had. So we really appreciate your involvement and really appreciate all of you too and your longstanding involvement with us. So for the next part, we're going to start the listening lounge. And I know some people have to go for classes and things like that. One of the things we wanted to do was also talk about the opportunities at HBService.com as well as all of our campus media. So I'm going to start with Bamidele. So you can do your Howard intro and talk a little bit about some of the things you've done and what you've gotten out of doing this. And he covered the months for you today.